I've generated over $100,000 for both my own agency and my clients' agencies directly from Upwork. And I was recently interviewed on a podcast with Michael Gardner where we chat about Upwork, how to grow your agency, and why Upwork is the easiest way to sign clients for your agency in 2024. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy this clip from the podcast, and I'll see you on the other side.
Your story is obviously it's a very successful one on Upwork, but it's not too dissimilar from more people here. But hey, I went on Upwork and I signed the first deal in a month or two. And it's funny because there seems to be this weird ego thing around Upwork that I find, especially if young guys in kind of the agency space where it's I'm an agency owner, I'm not a freelancer. But I think that's such a silly mindset to have because you have companies ranging from startups to literally Fortune 500 who have an extreme high intent and they want what you sell. And also considering sales cycle, I sell large packages, 5 figures generally for cold email. My sales cycles are normally months from cold email or anything else, which is normal in my industry. On Upwork, it's days. They're looking to hire tomorrow. So quite literally going on Upwork, applying to jobs, you can have a client in like a day. And again, I sell cold email, but cold emails will take you 2 weeks to warm up, at least a week to get a meeting, and a week to close. Fastest you could probably do is a month to client. On Upwork, it could actually be tomorrow. I don't think there's many other platforms that are like that. So with yourself, I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways from using Upwork? So if someone's listening, you're like, hey, fine, I'll try it. What are some of the key things that you think allowed you to succeed?
Yeah, so there's a few things. One of them is just genuinely delivering a good service, because in reality, if you do get a few really bad reviews, like that is going to really screw you up and it's going to really prevent you from signing larger contracts. And so that's one thing. Like I provided a lot of value up front. Like my first 2 jobs were each for $60 each, and they took me like over 4 hours to fulfill on each of them. And so like obviously that's not great. You don't want to be working for $15 an hour, but I got 2 awesome reviews, 2 5-star reviews that were really in depth. And so it was super worth it. And my third client, who was a larger retainer for $1,600 a month, actually referenced those reviews when I was talking with him. And so like just actually providing value up front, like even if it's not ideal, getting a few really good reviews and a few dollars earned on your profile is super, super helpful. And yeah, the other thing, like you said, is just speed. Like I think there's a common, I guess there's 2 things. First, I think there's a common misconception that Upwork is only for cheap work. And it just like couldn't be more false. Like I've worked with low 8-figure and multiple 7-figure companies on Upwork. And the funny thing is the sales calls with those companies are often the easiest. Like I've had sales calls where we sell $1,000 retainers and it takes less than 20 minutes. And it's just because like they have such a high intent, and they want to hire now. And so I think that misconception is completely a misconception and just like not really true at all.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more on that. And also, a lot of these companies that are huge are ones that, yes, you can cold email them, but not as a beginner. So, for example, I can book a meeting with a company that's doing 8 or 9 figures via cold email. It's a lot more work, but I can do it. But 7, 8 years ago, they would have no reason to talk to me. They talk to me now because of my social proof, my case studies. But on Upwork, you can just skip the line, which is awesome. And another thing that I think maybe people don't consider about Upwork is when selling to big businesses, the sales process is quite complicated because they want contracts, they want very specific invoicing. Sometimes they even want to confirm that you have business insurance. A lot of these elements that make selling to large companies hard. On Upwork, they're using Upwork as a middleman, so they don't really care. So it also makes your sales process easier logistically too. So that's just another big benefit of Upwork. Now, one question on Upwork, specifically on volume, is obviously we talked about getting your first earnings in a profile, either grinding it out, that's what I did as well, or you can have a client, if you have one, hire you there, whatever. How many jobs were you applying for per day on Upwork?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. At first, probably 5 to 10 a day, maybe somewhere in that range. But honestly, if you're personalizing them like you should be and writing good proposals using a template, a call to action, and some social proof, it doesn't take that long. Like people can tell that you're competent. And like another common misconception I hear is that Upwork is saturated or there's too much competition, which is like, sure, there's a ton of competition on Upwork, but you would be astounded as to how much of that competition is completely underqualified or their proposals are just terrible. Like I post jobs on Upwork and I've spent tens of thousands of dollars hiring people on Upwork, and I see dozens of proposals each week, and like at least 90% of them are terrible. They don't take the time to find my first name. It's just like a complete mess. And so I think getting on Upwork is kind of a no-brainer. Like it's not actually that saturated. And in terms of volume, like 5 to 10 a day, especially if you don't have clients, should be super easy. Like that doesn't take that long. And so that's what we were doing in the beginning. And then once we had like $7,000 or $8,000 earned on the platform of Upwork, I hired a VA to submit them for me, kind of systemize the process a little bit more. And then she was submitting between 50 to like 150 proposals per week.
You know, one thing I like to mention here is, yes, there's competition on Upwork, but the competition is much worse than other platforms. Because let's say cold email or LinkedIn or cold calling, you're competing with 7, 8, 9-figure B2B service companies, right? There is legitimately very good competition. And there is some of that on Upwork, but most of your competition is like the college student making side income, or like the corporate guy who like has a side hobby, like business project. Few other just full-time freelancers, a couple agency owners, but most of your competition aren't necessarily bad. They're probably good at what they do, but they're more of not entrepreneurs. They're just looking for side work. So if you take entrepreneurial principles, you're going to be competing against a much easier talent pool. I mean, when you're competing against an 8-figure agency that has case studies of name brands, you're going to struggle. It's going to work if you keep pushing, but you're going to struggle. Where if the competition is just much lower. I don't think a lot of people consider that. Now, another
Yeah, and
question.
I
Sorry, go
think one
ahead.
more thing no worries. I think one more thing I'll add in is like there's over 10,000 jobs posted on Upwork every day. Like that is like there's so much opportunity on Upwork, and people just don't actually realize the extent of like how many jobs is 10,000 every single day.
Yeah.
Like if you're just applying to like 10 jobs a day, like you're gonna crush it.
Now, going off that high number of jobs, if you're curious, like, well, before I start on Upwork, how do I know? Simply go on Upwork, search your service, and see how many jobs come up. Also, as a search engine, Upwork's a bit funky. So, like, sometimes if you have like cold email versus cold emails, or like Facebook ads versus Meta ads versus Instagram ads, the results are different. So, play around with it. But getting to the point here, I'm curious. Obviously, you probably did some tracking on your applications. Do you happen to know roughly what your KPI was from like how many jobs you need to apply for to get a conversation?
Yeah, so our KPI, and I don't know when I was first starting, but like
Yeah.
right now, our KPIs are roughly 10% of proposals submitted send us a message, roughly 35 to 40% of messages book a call, and then I'm closing at like 30% on Upwork because people's intent is just so high, and like some months it's like 50%.
Yeah.
It's different than you because I don't sell that high ticket 5-figure service, and so it really is like super easy to close people on Upwork because especially if it's like a one-time, package for a few $1,000s, like a big company doing multiple 6, 7, or 8 figures, like they don't really care. It's like $2,000 is nothing to them. And so to be able to have the convenience of hiring someone right now who seems competent, who can just do the job, like even if it's a little more expensive, is totally worth it for them.
I completely agree with you there. And it's funny, so our KPIs are very similar. For me, it's 10 applications, 1 conversation, 3 conversations, 1 call. And then on the call, it depends what I'm selling. If I'm factoring down sales, it's around 25% close rate. If I'm factoring my core offer, it's a bit lower. But those numbers are pretty easy because you think if you're in a very broad service, like let's say social media management, there are probably 10,000 jobs for that per month posted. So, after you do all your filtering, there's probably 3 or 4,000 worth applying to. You're talking about a source that could potentially get you 50 to 100 calls a month. And there's no worrying about email deliverability. There's no worry about LinkedIn account limits or social media DM limits. A lot of the logistics that make other platforms competitive, which is fine. That's just the nature of business. You don't really have those. So it's just funny how you have this super easy opportunity with limited competition compared to other platforms, and you just have very little utilization.